insights in solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
And good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet. Wow, what a difference a week makes. It's almost like hyperspeed hits us again this week. How many things can we count on our fingers and toes that show us, well, we definitely switched into a new type of planetary system here. It's kind of not hidden anymore. Have you noticed that? But when I look across the newsscape, what I see is millions of crickets invade parts of Nevada, cold conditions, freeze warnings coming out northwest U.S. Next week, it's going to be 30 degree or 37, 38 degrees, 41 degrees in the evenings. Wonder how that'll affect the fruit crops. Crops in southern Alberta are turning brown. No measurable precipitation, 50-year lows. We're experiencing the lowest in U.S. wheat since 1950s. And everywhere you look, it's all about the food. And now we got John Kerry bringing the old fight to us here. Before it's the Dutch farmers. Now they're trying to have saying that production of food is actually causing climate change. So I really hope anybody out there can, pass a message on to those that are not really, they don't have the time. I get it, but a lot of people don't have time. That there's actually trying to remove food production, saying that it's causing climate change. Like at some point, people are going to have to wake up. And I really hope messaging that goes out just to share that, we are at that point now where they want to remove food production on the planet. Now, I think it's gone over that edge. So hopefully that'll be a catalyst to wake people up and say, whoa. You're going to stop food production because, there's going to be nobody around if we don't have any food to eat. Oh, wait, you can buy it from a factory. It'll be a patented product, printed meat, something, GMO'd that, whatever. Everything will be patented and barcoded that you could purchase. There'll be no more natural foods left. So remember, this pointing of the finger is basically at small farmers like myself. I got 6 acres. They're going to complain on my buckwheat crop because I got too much nitrogen out there. This is the kind of thing they're going at. Oh, my apple trees, I put triple 19 and boosted them with phosphorus to try to throw some more fruit, which, by the way, my crab apple trees are coming in wonderfully. We already got fruit on the crab apples. I just are they pointing because I got a few geese out here? Like what? And everywhere you look, it's small farmer, but they're not talking anything about Monsanto's 1,000-acre, 100,000-acre, GM crop for ethanol. And you can see where this is clearly going. So I would encourage everybody out there, please start the conversation that they're now going after the food supply and the climate debate. And that's it. That's truly, they've pushed us against the wall where you can't go any further back now. Like once you're pushed against the wall and they're taking away your food supply, literally taking it away, saying you have to abide by a completely different set of rules of purchasing because the climate's being ruined by what? By companies doing it. I don't have a super tanker cruising across the ocean. But to say that I'm part of the problem because I'm putting some acres under buckwheat to feed some sheep, that I'm the problem, not inappropriate at best. So Ransom, I'm glad you're here tonight joining me. You have had your eye on the news more than I, because again, I was out finishing up the barn. We finally got it finished. We got the shelves in the back. We got the sliding 8-foot by 8-foot doors, 2 of those on the front, because we got a 32-foot long barn there. And another week outside has been wonderful. But stepping back into it again, I'm back into the mix. So anyway, throw us some thoughts for the evening to kick us off, because you sent me a few stories to chew on tonight. So I'll let you rev it into high gear.
Awesome. I was just thinking that we should send the whole green movement, like all of them, all of these people from, the world leaders at Davos and Bilderberg and and all of these World Economic Forum people, and send them over to Nevada so they could eat all the crickets, so they'll save the farms and save the planet. If we could just get them over there, maybe start vacuum packing those bugs there. We're lucky here where I'm at. I haven't seen any of that, but we kind of predicted that was going to happen. Talking about the excess water while they're trying to still say that everywhere's in a drought, and the snowpack, record-breaking snowpack everywhere through the Rockies. It is not a drought. They're going to continue to keep saying it's a drought, just because that way they can keep all their little initiatives in there. And I'm surprised they're not telling them in Nevada to just go out and eat the bugs. We're getting to the point of a complete control grid, from every aspect, from birth to death, from cradle to grave. They have technology out and programs going simultaneously to capture the future generations, and even these alive generations now, but more so the future generations being born from here on out, are going to have a total control grid where their mind, their body, and their soul, I'm going to say soul, are all captured and captivated and utilized as a product. And we'll start, kind of tonight's thing with the synthetic human embryo created in groundbreaking advance. Not something that I haven't been predicting for years that they would go ahead and do. And whenever you know about all of the other programs going on, from gene editing to mRNA to various forms of gene manipulation are real technologies in the world now. And the fact that you could, they're mixing more than one human being together, and things like that. It's just what we've talked about before. This is the singularity where multiple human species may go forth from this point. And this is exactly what they're talking about right here. Scientists have created synthetic human embryos using stem cells and their groundbreaking advance that sidesteps the need for either egg or sperm. That's right. Now, think about that just for a second. That one sentence right there, and groundbreaking advance that sidesteps the need for egg or sperm. In other words, it sidesteps the need for a populace. And now that we have literally buildings in the making, in the plans to construct, to grow human beings in little bubbles, they no longer, now we're to the point that the elite no longer need the parent. They no longer need the population. So it's really interesting to see how they pull the plug, because that's what's going on. Where the plug is being pulled on the entire human civilization as we know it, from the way we eat our food to the way we reproduce to the way that we think that we have privacy in our own head. And, everywhere we look now, we're finding out exactly that they have done exactly what we said. They've been spying on every single thing you've done. I'm going to say for 20 years, they're kind of admitting, the last 5 years, that governments around the world are in cahoots with all of the tech moguls and giants, the social media platforms, the news media, and, all of the programs that filter down from top to bottom from there that are pushing Marxist agendas, cultural revolutions. And it's ironic. I saw an article the other day that China was kind of, making fun of the United States for pushing their own cultural revolutions. That's funny, right? But into the news right here. Some pretty trippy stuff's going on. From end to end, governments and tech giants are admitting that they have been spying on you. They have been manipulating you. And this is something that I've said for years and years. I've been talking about it. People don't wrap their head around how far advanced these programs really are. So we're at the point where they do not need humans to create humans. So like in the stories of the Epic of Gilgamesh, or, the Vedic tales of, meeting other humans and tampering with them so that they would be better workers. This blows those stories out of the water. What we're talking about now is a complete bottom-up designing of the human being. We're talking about eugenics on steroids. And then at the same time, the remaining population is subject to some of the weirdest scenarios in human history, I would think. And because of political reasons, we can't really even get into some of those topics because, the thought police would get mad and turn us off. But here's one that we can talk about. Elon Musk claims people are already cyborgs as our memory is outsourced to computers. And this is another thing I've talked to for a long time. The generations probably that are 40 and under, anybody 40 and under, for the most part, is now using the internet for an external hard drive. If you ask them some kind of factoid or something, they don't know. They have to go look it up. They have to Google it. We have to go check the Ministry of Truth for the answer, the authoritative sources of information. We have to go check out them to see what it is. Everything from, the definition of words to factoids about history in the evolution of human beings, to the way that history played out, why and who did what, who the baddies and the goodies were. It's all fiction that's created for this network that they now have total control over. Like I said, people 40 and under, they don't know how to do anything. And I'm not being mean to those people that are normal people out there that are in that age group. Of course, there are some normal people and they didn't fall for the trap. But as the vast majority of the 8 billion people on the planet, even in the third world countries, you can see that their life is centered around this little device, this little droid, and that thing is spying on them. It's reporting to the government everything they do. And it's manipulating, their thought process, from the self-censorship that it makes people do, all the way to giving them false information and mistruths as a form of brainwashing. I mean, that's what it is. And now governments are all admitting that, yes, they are in cahoots with the social media platforms to hide information, to give you bogus information. This is where we're at. So we're at the precipice of human civilization prior to now. That it is over. They are collapsing it one system at a time. And some of those systems obviously are surrounded around feeding the planet. And like you said, they are trying to literally outlaw being a natural human animal on the planet. And, people don't think we're animals, whatever, but all of the laws that are surrounding human beings are all those that apply to products. And here's a story just to kind of give you the idea. Morgue manager at Harvard Medical School among 7 charged with stealing and selling human remains. That's a bizarre story, but if you look in there and you see what they were charged with, they were charged with receiving and selling stolen goods, because human beings, from the baby to the adult, is goods. We are products. And now they're pushing it in your face that that's exactly what's going on, and they're going to tell you, how the cabbage ate the cow, because they're in charge of the information flow. And we need to break free from this whole transformation that's going on, because think about this: they tell us silly things now, and people that are dependent on these authoritative sources for information believe it. They believe stuff like, here's a headline from Yahoo News: the climate story behind the Philadelphia I-95 bridge collapse. So, I haven't even read this article, but the fact that they're trying to add the word climate to the beginning of it, I already know it's propaganda, because they're going to say, without me reading it, I already know in some way that man is bad and we're destroying the planet and it's our fault that everything's falling apart. It has nothing to do with the fact that, they take in massive record amounts of taxation and then don't use the money on the infrastructure, from our grid to our highway system to the railway. You think all of the things that are involved in how you live your life, especially how the food gets to your dinner table, are being downgraded, destroyed, closed, turned off. And it's kind of like that movie, if you ever seen the movie with Tom Hanks, it's called Terminal. And he gets stuck in the airport and he can't go anywhere. And every time he tries to go to the door to go outside, the police tell him, sorry, America's closed. And that's exactly what's going on. I was looking at this Twitter thing talking about, I don't know how much we can talk about it, but the train crash that happened, and people are testing filters and water samples and grass way far out of the area that we were talking about initially, where those dioxins, I think that's what it's called, are falling and saturating everything. Well, they're looking everywhere else, and guess what? It's everywhere. They're finding it everywhere, which means it's like anything they say, you can't believe them at face value. Any kind of authoritative sources that comes on and tells you how things are going on, you need to look for yourself. You need to find out for yourself. And the days of trusting blindly governments and news agencies should have been over decades ago, but I think it's finally catching up. And you see that we're a complete banana republic. You have one political party throwing the other political party in jail. It's hard to tell whether or not it's a Saturday Night Live skit or some kind of made-for-TV, soap opera. And it's scary in both directions. If it's all fake and this is just part of how they control people, that's scary enough. But if it's real, it's even scarier. It shows you that we're literally on the verge of collapse. When the power structure starts doing things like, dictators do, where they're basically, taking bribes, doing this, doing that, pay for play, whatever, we're allowed to do it. If you say anything about it, you can go to jail. And that's where we're at. So it's a really scary point. And at the same time, in the backdrop of all this, the United States has now joined the United Kingdom and sending depleted uranium ammunition to the Ukraine battle combat theater, whatever you want to call it. And NATO kicks off one of its largest air drills in history, hosted by Germany, right next to the war zone, I guess you want to call it. And then we're seeing, infrastructure get knocked out, as predicted. They're taking out everything. The whole area is being destroyed. I feel bad that the propaganda is so thick because it seems to me that only the countries that are hosting the proxies are the victims to the bigger powers going on right now. And that all looks to me like massive hunger is in the future for Eastern Europe and maybe even Western Europe, if the way things keep going. France nationalizes its country's biggest power provider. There's a communist takeover of power in France. And it's on and on and on where, countries are basically open about the fact that they're switching to socialist and communist type governments at the same time as preaching that we're the free world and we're the freest in the world. It reminds me of what's they call that guy that was in Iraq, Baghdad Bob or whatever, the guy that came on the TV saying that, the Iraqi forces were destroying Americans, the invaders. And of course, Baghdad Bob or something like that. But anyway, it's the same thing. They did it in Nazi Germany when they were losing. They were still preaching on all of the forms of media that were winning. And, so we get down to now, and our side of the propaganda is telling us, we're mad about China doing this and that, but at the same time, there's backdoor dealings. Like I was just looking at a story talking about the bad billionaires of Hawaii, and come to find out most of the billionaires that own these giant segments big enough to have pineapple farms and other stuff in Hawaii are actually owned by Chinese nationals and Chinese corporations. So America is closed for Americans, but it's open for business for everybody else. And then here's another one, more spying. French bill would allow law enforcement to remotely switch on microphones when surveilling suspects. Now, that's nothing new. They've been doing that for a long time. But all of these, here's an article saying nearly a third of Generation Z supports the government placing cameras in their homes as Snowden warns of growing surveillance. So it's like we've ignored the revelations of the past decade and how that our systems are completely corrupt. And it's now just like a part of the culture. Oh, well, it's no big deal. Why not just put a camera in our house so everybody can watch us? Then they can figure out what foods we're eating. And, then you might get the midnight knock of the secret police because they saw you eating beef in your living room instead of crickets. I don't know. What do you think, David?
I think that with the evacuation plans for U.S. citizens out of Taiwan, that things are about to get a little bit weird, quirky, and on purpose more scattered to bend your reality further. So you knew this summer was going to be something to behold. I'll take it on the climate side there. So Ransom wrapped up pretty much in a nutshell what's going on in sort of the political end. We didn't talk about the economy yet. That's just all what you consider geopolitics in terms of one country this, one country that. And it's a lot of saber rattling, but, a lot of people are paying attention to this at all aspects, trying to interconnect dots and things. Now, think about all that going on by itself. Now, if there's nothing else happening, that alone would be like, wow, it seems like the world's pretentiously close to war, precariously, excuse me. And you start to see, and Gerald Celente and quite a few others say the same thing again and again. When all else fails, they take you to war. Now, again, it's a disguise, a cover-up. U.S. Treasury's out here putting $1 trillion into our economy in this next 30 days. And we've seen the price of silver go up, dropped off a little bit. Bitcoin's getting crushed. But that was all, what had happened in 2020 also from March and April. They did the same thing. So we're going to see some of the same results. Okay. But now, have you noticed on the climate side of things, the Canadian wildfire smoke gives Minnesota the worst air in the U.S. Remember last week it was New York with the orange smoke. Now it just shifted over to Minnesota. All right. Well, why are all these fires still sweeping out of British Columbia? You see where it's moving these pieces around. It's the same story, just shifted over to a new location. And, memory of a goldfish is what I'm kind of getting at here. And also the attention span and willingness to put work in. So here's just a story to try to frame the reference of how I'm considering, people's attention spans. So there's a family who in California, in Los Angeles, they had a very old family, and the grandfather had started collecting pennies from 1917 until present. Now, after they changed the copper content, he quit collecting pennies. So the oldest penny in the collection was from the 1980s. So this guy's penny collection spanned from 1917 to the 1980s. And there were 800,000 pennies in there. 800,000. Bags and bags and bags and boxes and rolls of boxes and the images. I used to collect coins as a kid too. Sold a lot of my collection back in the day when I was less intelligent about life than I am now. But, some of these pennies were worth $1,000 each. Now, they looked through the box for like 2 hours and they couldn't find $1 million penny. So they got frustrated and they're selling the entire collection for $25,000. Now, here's the thing. The whole face value of all those, 800,000 pennies is $8,000. 800,000 divided by 100, you're going to get $8,000 in that. So what is it that somebody couldn't either pay somebody else or spend the time? Because even those pennies from the 1917 era would be worth, $20, $50 each. But they're so lazy. And I really am shocked being a coin collector when I was a kid that this is one of the biggest coin collections ever found of pennies ever in the United States, ever. And they're willing to sell it for $25,000. That is the most ridiculously low price you could ever get. Even if you put it up at 10 cents per coin, then you're getting past what their sale price is. And you got to be kidding me that some of those pennies, every single one of those is worth 10 cents. The copper value on a penny right now is about 3 cents if you're getting full copper. This is the same thing that I did a story on not too long ago down in Argentina. The 2 peso coins, these are older coins, obviously. When they broke them apart, the actual different metals in them, the copper, and then I think it was nickel on the outer edge of there. The coin was worth $12 in metal melt value compared to the $2 face value on it. And that was in Argentina. So we're seeing something here. At the bare minimum, they're worth 3 cents each. So that's on the melt value. And they're willing to sell the entire collection for $25,000. If I had that money, I would buy that thing in a fifth of an eighth of a second, because I guarantee you there's millions of dollars worth of pennies to be found in there. But for a couple to get bequeathed something from their grandfather's collection that ended in 1980, it's so mind-boggling that somebody could be that lazy that they couldn't find $1 million coin within 2 hours of looking through. And they decided, it's too much trouble. Could they not have a pneumacist come in and then look at the collection for them? Are they really that stupid where they're, and I look at society just in a broader context. This story sums up our planet at the moment, at least in the Western nations, the Five Eyes nations, of goldfish attention span. If it's not instant gratification and baller $1 million deals and things within two tenths of a second, they give up on it and go somewhere else. And then they wonder why they're sitting at home. Like, you are putting in no effort whatsoever into the result of your reality. I look at this and say, they could retire off this penny collection. But after 2 hours, it was too difficult. When we're going to have to grow food and your green sprouts aren't popping up after the first 7 days, there's orders of magnitude in terms of waiting for things and getting us, ready for and the movement into a more self-sustaining lifestyle. I look at it as a broader spectrum of, like I say, the Five Eyes nations. 95% of the people will not make it through. And I saw some updates too on the Deagle report numbers, and they're looking more. They updated the list, and somebody broke it down and put it into a spreadsheet and showed that the Five Eyes nations and all these Western nations are going to decline 60 to 70% in population, whereas the selected nations are going to be level or increase in population, and also the GDP will reflect that. So people aren't ready for these changes in such a gargantuan fashion here that you're willing to overlook an entire $1 million in your hands because you're too lazy to look and you didn't find like a 1909 VDBS or something, or VBS coin or something, like, excuse me, was there any double stamped coins in there? Like, they press the blank twice on it, or was, what about all those steel pennies that were during the war? Even the most terrible condition of the steel pennies still sell for dollars each. Dude probably had hundreds, if not 1,000, of those steel pennies of different varying degrees of, bringing it up to proof state condition. And all. I'm just so baffled at just. Could they not look on the net and get an idea of what the coin collection was worth or what some of those pennies are worth? I'm just baffled. And again, what is it? How long is it going to? You mentioned the net of everybody looking on the net, and this becomes their new, what they do to find the info. Well, to grow food, yeah, it's pretty easy to find info on how to grow food on the net, but to do it in real life, you're dealing with pests. You're dealing with time. You're dealing with your own energy, the heat, the rain, the lack of, too much. There's so many variables going on there that I just don't know how much time people are going to be able to devote into figuring it out, because people they're at a loss for time and a loss for patience. And the way our world's been set up, like if you were to give the same opportunities to others around the world in more impoverished nations, you'd have people jumping for joy in the streets. But these people seem to be burdened by their grandfather leaving them $800,000 worth of pennies. So they called over to Wells Fargo and they're like, no, I'm sorry, we can't put it in the safe. It's too much, like volume. And they got angry and frustrated because the bank couldn't take their pennies. Now, who in their right mind would give those pennies to a bank and just take face value for it? That is, I'm sorry to say, idiocy, the idiocracy at its best. And you look around the planet, we are in idiocracy, and it's been planned as such. From the education system to the overwhelm of the media, this whole fascination with movie stars and sports and all these things that keep people so distracted. I don't know. I really, I look at, I'm not very hopeful now. Not at all. And then I look over here, there's another story coming on Amazon and other retailers revamp free shipping as costs soar. And remember, Ransom, you and I had talked about this a year ago or so, and I was told many years ago, once Amazon stops free shipping, that's the actual time that the transition begins, and the shift is right then. So we're getting precariously close, and it's not about returns either this time. I just talked about online retailers who use so-called free shipping and delivery to customer loyalties are scrambling. And if you're not in the royalty or the customer loyalty club, you're not going to have any more free shipping. So does that count as Amazon has stopped free shipping, or is it splitting the gray hair there between they're not going to ship to those who are not in the loyalty club, i.e. Amazon whatever buyer program, Amazon Prime? If you're not in that, you don't get free shipping. Everybody else will have to pay. But I start to look at this with the airlines at the same thing. Airline tickets going up, some doubling and tripling from last year's or 2 years ago rate. Now that people are able to travel again, most of the, a lot of restrictions have been lifted. But now look at what that does. Your ticket that would have cost you $1,000 before is now $3,000. I mean, that knocks a lot of people out at the knees on being able to travel, because then when you get to the location you're going to, all their food prices have doubled and tripled. The accommodation, everybody's scraping and scrapping for any kind of extra means that can be made. Hoteliers are battling out for the highest prices, and they may have a vacant hotel, but they still want whatever ridiculous prices for each room, and they're willing not to take it in case they can get one person who will pay it. And it's just like one of these subsidized worlds we're living in, where everything is the wallpaper's falling off the inside of the room here. And speaking of which, I stumbled across that article again. The siege of Stalingrad and Leningrad both. There were recipes going around for how to boil your belt, and there were also recipes going around on how to use the glue off the back of your wallpaper to make soups, picking them. But back then, you got to realize it was pretty much, like they said, send the old mayor off to the glue factory. It was pretty much just like that kind of college in and thing. For the glue on the back of the wallpapers back in the 1930s, 1940s, like today, it's all toxic chemical. You couldn't eat the glue off your wallpaper and survive like you could back in Russia in the 1940s. But I mean, look, it's where we're going with this whole thing here. People are not, they're still at the point of you're taking away the food supply, and they're still okay with that. I really have lost hope for humanity at this point. That is okay that you're going to take away the food supply. And nothing is said. Nigh an eyebrow raised. And we're supposed to believe that humanity is going to come together and mull through this thing when your food is actually being pulled at the moment. And they're telling you they're going to confiscate farms in America to reduce nitrogen. And they're like, oh, well, I'll still go buy my food in the supermarket. Just shocked. Shocked. To the point where, I got to rein it in here and put it in check here on the program, because I could go off on a tangent. And this railroad merger also, CPKS Railroad, this is off U.S. Wheat Associates. Now, I talked about this article a while back, I think probably somewhere around March, April, but they're giving a little more detail now on the merger here and how much it's going to affect wheat exports, corn exports, barley exports, of all things, from Canada, and then our sorghum exports coming out of we consider like the Panhandle area in Texas. So the Kansas City Southern Railway Company, KCS, Canadian Pacific Railway Company, have now merged, and they're going to offer a single line service from Canada to the United States and through Mexico. Now, you can find this on trains.com. And the rail logistics are going to be part of the new wheat export basis. Now, basis means the actual transportation fees, insurance, cargo, loading, unloading fees, whatever that is. So you're going to get a spot price. So just a quick rundown on how this works. Like when you're seeing futures market prices, and let's say it's $3. All right, well, you're going to pick up whatever grains you got for $3. But you need to move it somewhere. And that's called the basis. So anything that's in addition to the spot price to get your grains from point A to point B, transportation-wise, insurance, and all that stuff, is called the basis. And usually it's an extra dollar or, 40 cents or whatever it is, because they'll quote it, market rate plus basis. And they're split into two categories, but it comes up to one unified price. So here's where it gets a little interesting is these export hubs that are in the Great Lakes, Gulf of Mexico, and Pacific Northwest, they're going to get a Class 1 railroad rating in North America. But as you move through Class 2 in Canada and Class 3 in Mexico, your rates for insurance and carriage change within each of the zones based on the class. So if you're going to want to run something all the way from Canada, like a barley crop, for example, all the way down into Mexico, this is where it's going to get weird because they're going to charge you different rates as it passes through each individual zone, and it'll require individual insurance and freight carriers. And again, this is where they're going to stick you. It has to get permission for the cargoes to pass through each area. They could block off one of the cargoes at any border crossing and say no. It's just another way they're going to control the food. Now, all four largest rail companies, Burlington Northern, Santa Fe, BNSF, Union Pacific, Canadian National, CN, they own 82% of all North American traffic, and they are all working together with this grain market share for North America. And they're trying to deem themselves Class 1 railroads, Canadian Class 2, and then relegating Mexico to Class 3. Oh, they're so biased. They're so racist. How could you put Class 3? I mean, they're really rating it in class like Five Eyes nations and underdeveloped nations, right? So even with this moving forward, it means that moving corn or wheat or whatever crop, just even in around amongst our nations here that are connected, is going to become a bottleneck on purpose. This is the way they're going to cause artificial shortages. If you're not able to export it, if you're not able to move it across the border, then what? I mean, the grain's going to stack up? Are the farmers going to stop growing if they know they can't get their exports out, or they can't even get nearby bases for delivery? Or, I mean, so let me see. I'm over here on the the hard red spring wheat off of U.S. Wheat Associates here. And let's see, it's about $1.55 per bushel right now. And basis levels are up 50 cents over the previous 5-year average. So I'm looking at that going, okay. Just even them putting this news out has driven the cost to get it even delivered before this is even enacted into another 50 cents per bushel on top of. And it comes out to, if you wanted to know exactly, $18.40 extra for that same metric ton from last week. So now multiply this by millions of metric tons. We're just looking at another price driver here. And the way that food can be controlled so much more easily if they really were to put the thumb screws down on these three regions and disconnect them for deliveries. I mean, we're lucky in the United States, we grow a lot of food. But Canada being, moving to the red shirts up there and their little red books waving in the wind. And those of you who would understand the Xiaohongbun from the Cultural Revolution days. And in Chinese, it's called Wenhua Da Geming. And their little red book. Parents were at the behest of students or their children turning them in. Now, cut off the grains. Canada's going communist in about a fifth of an eighth of a second. They'll have to nationalize everything. They'll have to go to, they have to distribute it to those who they deem worthy of getting the food. And you can see how this is going to move directly. Now, for us in the U.S., what's coming up from Mexico? What if all the Mexican products stop? Oh, it can't come over the border now. Well, it didn't meet the criteria. Your level 3 railroads compared to the level 1 railroads, your basis is too low. We can't insure that cargo. So you can't run it on a rail because it can't get insurance. It's the same way. I'm going to say, this got my video flagged last week, demonetized. I was saying that in Canada, once they have these fires, they're going to determine them that they are going to be fire risk zones. And you will not be able to insure a home in that fire risk zone. Therefore, your mortgage will be pulled. Unless you have a paid off house in cash, the bank will refuse that, and you will be the defaulter on that because you cannot provide insurance. But on the inverse, remember, please, this is so important. When they call force majeure on mortgages across the U.S. or Canada or Australia, and they try to move it over to a CBDC, central bank digital currency, that is not the same that you agreed to pay back the loan in. the bank defaults at that point. But the whole thing is how many areas now, after they've had fires in Canada, can they put fire risk zones in from all the way over West Coast in British Columbia, all the way over to the East Coast in the Maritimes? Imagine how many hundreds of thousands of properties they can put in the fire risk zone, and then everybody who's out there in the countryside needs to leave. They can't get insurance after this year. That seems to be the plan. And it is very much no different than if you got class 1 railroads or class 3 railroads, and we can't insure the class 3 railroad coming out of Mexico, the cargo. Without that insurance, that cargo doesn't move. That food gets stranded. And I'm looking at the overlay on the comparison of this saying, you know what? This is an all-out destruction event of our food supply and your ability to live in the countryside and provide your own food if it can't be brought to you. And Ransom, I know you're going to know. I know you're going to know what to say after this, because it's quirky that these two major, things that are happening at the same time are actually dovetailing in real time, all based on non-insurability to cut off the source of something, your home, the cargo inbound, whatever it is. And I was told the same thing about conversation earlier about car insurance. What if you're in the fire zone and they won't insure your car? Somebody can come and repossess your car or your farm tractor. It's the same exact thing, but on a vehicle level. I never even thought about that. I was talking with Stig earlier, this guy David Stig Hansen, and he was telling me, what happens when they pull the car insurance too? Or it's like, never thought about that. He's like, yeah, they're going to drive up with the wrecker and repo your car or your farm equipment. No different than the Holodomor, what happened in Ukraine in the 1930s, but just under the legal guise of the law this time. So, Ransom, I'll leave it there. I know you know where to go with it, man.
Wow, well, that was all goldfishing out, man. I mean, there was so many things that you talked about there that sparked off ideas. Let's start with the weird penny thing. I found the article. I sent it to you also. Some guy he says 81,000 pennies, and he just took it to the bank for $800, meaning that he probably didn't look through those pennies, just like you were saying. And obviously, the metals of older pennies clue is worth more than the money, obviously. But back to those idea of the food going back and forth in the railroads and all of that stuff. Almost, I don't know what the number is, but I've showed the states before and what they're dependent on, of imports from other countries, not their own place. So if you got a map out and it showed what the number one imports were for each state, it would break it down. It would basically be Mexico, China, India. That's it, just about. And if you look at south to our border about what's going on, you're talking about, no-go zones because of fire, because of this or that. But what do you think is going to happen when things get bad and cartels who are already organized, already control the border, already control the trade routes, already have their finger in the avocado, the corn, and other industries? What happens when they don't say it's okay to send the food north? Not to mention that there's obviously a combat zone developing along our southern border. And who knows which direction the Mexican government will actually go, because, there's been a large struggle between a capitalistic style government versus a socialistic style government. And, with the election of Obrador there, he's outright socialist. And it's weird to hear him say some things that make sense, but it's only when talking about the United States. But you can see these no-go zones is part of the overall plan. And the reason I say that is because I sent you this article about the guy that got denied going inside of the store because he didn't download the app and he didn't know he had to have the app. And we were talking about that a few weeks ago, about how the retail stores, the big box stores like Walmart, Target, etc., are closing their shops in high crime areas for, whatever reason they give the public. They're closing and they're moving to a more centralized location. Now, when you see that little story about the code and the QR code, and the guy didn't have the app, so he couldn't come in and shop, it kind of makes you think of what I was talking about before, about how they're shutting off access to the food retailers in certain areas, and then putting them in a centralized location. Now, if that centralized location happens to be in a more up-to-do or wealthy neighborhood, or even a more government controlled area, you're going to see that certain people are not allowed to go there based on, guess what, their social credit score, which a lot of people in the United States don't know that they have. But they do, because the DHS has been working on this for a long time. That's the Department of Homeland Security. And they've already multiple times sought to enact or assign social credit style risk scores to social media users based on what they talk about, what they do. Now, when you see all of this intermingling with the recent outbreak of tyranny that we had for the last couple of years that infected in a pandemic style several nations around the world, you kind of see that that is the style that they're going to. It's this Chinese style, dragonfly software, facial recognition, and different zones allotted to different people based on not just the way they behave, but what they think and how much money they have, how much wealth they have. So if you have the right amount of wealth, you'll be in the better sectors that have the stores. And as long as you have your app and all of the things that are required to keep your app active, i.e. medical programs that are going on, you might have to do to use their system. It kind of shows you exactly what's going on. Now, when you combine all of these plans of depopulation and, controlling the entire human domain, as they said in the little operation that they were doing, I forgot what it was called there in Texas and stuff. That was the Jade Helm, I think it was called. That was what the military said that their goal with that was to practice controlling the entire human domain. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means your obviously physical property, your mental, what you're talking about with people, what you believe in, your political beliefs, your religious beliefs, etc. But also like your entire internet realm of things. So they have it totally incorporated there. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Everything is going over to this style of controlling everything about you, your mind, body, and soul. With your mind, they have programs out there to manipulate what you're doing, what you believe in, what's right, what's wrong, etc. What the latest thing is, whether or not you have the right flag or pronouns in your bio. And then you have the body. They're controlling the body through medical programs, but also mainly through your food. And if you're keeping up to tabs on what I've been talking about, as far as altering the genetic biosphere of the planet, which is, in progress and has been going on for a while now, genetic pollution, if you will, that they are attacking directly also the body. Now, when you get into the soul, that's kind of the human behavior, and it kind of goes back to your mind there, what's right and wrong. And if they can continue to convince people that things like massive wars are good, killing people is for freedom, kind of like the whole thing that the George Orwell 1984, freedom is actually slavery, and all of these ideas that, they were pushing on people. And then you look at what's going on. It's exactly that. And some of the things you were talking about is a lot like science fiction movies that they pushed that were mainstream, very popular A-list movies. Like there's one called Time, where, the ghettos were segregated. You weren't allowed to travel between areas. You had to be rich to get to a certain area. You had to have a certain type of monetary system, and they were using the time of their life as the monetary value. But you could switch that right over to the credit score, which they've already set up this infrastructure. Now, when it goes live, I don't know. But the tech companies will take the leadership with this and start punishing people from their banks to their social media accounts and things like that. And you will find that certain people are being unpersoned. And if they don't have the apps and the QR codes, they can't go buy food at these places, which leaves them trying to grow food out of the planet. And like you said, they're starting to make laws that where they're pushing the idea that farming, growing your own food, and surviving as a natural human being is not only bad, but now going to be against the law. So yeah, that's exactly what's happening. It's a dystopic nightmare. They can use any number of reasons why you're not supposed to go here or there. And then it gets into the future of what you touched on it with the automobiles. The future of automobiles has already been told to us by them. They want to eliminate private ownership of cars. In the future, if you drive a gasoline car, you're going to have a special kind of insurance to even be on the road. And that means that'll be dependent on whatever social credit score system they're using at the time, on whether or not you're even allowed to drive on the roads themselves. Now, think about if they can control that. It sounds far-fetched, but that's exactly what's going on in China. If you've said the wrong thing or done the wrong thing, or you don't have the right job, or you haven't participated in the right way with the party, guess what? You can't get on the train. You can't go to the movies. You can't buy from the better restaurants. You can't go to certain grocery stores. You're not allowed to walk around in certain areas of the city. Or little robots will come out, send an alert and say, beep, beep, beep. Oh, wrong face, wrong social credit score. And that's going to happen here. And when you look at all of these programs, it seems like what they're doing is shoving people into the cities and then burning them down from the core, like in the city. Like if you've been to any city lately, like I know you got to go see New York. I think the last time I actually went on a drive and started driving through, I went up to Washington, and at the time, and this is years ago, I think it was like 2016, it was already covered in tent cities and people on different kinds of substances that have completely given up on being part of civilization. And you see these programs being pushed everywhere. The legalization of crazy things like suicide or drugs of certain kinds that are obviously detrimental to the human being. And at the same time, outlawing things that are beneficial to your health, the things that make you live longer. Those are all going to be the bad things. So if you live in a city, you won't be able to, have a garden in your yard. You won't be able to do this, that, and the other thing. You'll have to keep it exactly like they want it. You'll have to, keep everything medically up to date. So this is the nightmare scenario that's already in place. And if you haven't noticed, they implemented it in several of the countries we formerly thought of as free countries. There's a holdout here, and there's only one reason for the holdout in the United States of America, and everybody knows what it is, and that is being attacked right now too. That will be the last little thing that you see fall, the last domino before everything in the world collapses back into basically a Stone Age feudalistic society where only the elite and the government people have access to the technologies and, the luxuries of a technological world. Meanwhile, everyone else will be on what essentially is rations, and they'll call this a universal basic income. They already have forms of it, various kinds of safety nets, what they're supposed to be, but they've turned into a handout, not a hand up. So none of these programs ever help anyone leave poverty. And in fact, they keep them in poverty. And to say that there wasn't a designed plan for decades, I mean, because if you go back to the 50s, right after the war, we made this giant industrial complex that built cars, built everything. We had these giant manufacturers centers in the cities. And then what happened? More people moved to the city. The city started booming. They started doing good. And then new leadership took over and turned it in a totally different direction. The jobs left. The crime went up. The access to basic human needs disappeared. And now what we're looking at is things that look like Hiroshima, except for no bomb has been dropped. So when you start to realize that the United States is in full swing collapse right now, you got to ask yourself, if we're doing that bad, what's going on in the third world countries, and how quick can they fall? And, we've seen countries just fall completely really fast. I mean, Venezuela is a good example, but there's others, and this is happening. And in the backdrop, they are completely redistributing their powers, where they will have complete control on all transit, shipping, business, and the movement of foods or goods from any place to another. Even Europe has become, when they turned it into the euro, it was supposed to be kind of like a free, open country that involved all the countries, but now it's turned into where everybody's wanting to now put up fences around their own country because people are coming in masses. They don't mix with the culture in a productive way. And then, you were talking also, my goldfish brain brought this back up. You were talking about the populations. If you really look at the graphs of populaces from the continents, you'll see that certain areas, most of their population is under 30 years old. And all of the first world nations that you would think about as being important or controlling stuff, their medium age range is in the 50s.
And we'll be right back to continue our conversation. Ransom Godwin holding down the fort here. David DuByne as well. We'll be back.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
I've never realized a time that was more necessary to make sure you have a backup of food than there is right now. We see all of the food markets going expensive, every item. And some of these items that they offer in these kits are approximately $1.50 to $2 a meal or serving, which is quite a bit cheaper than anything that you're buying now. I'm really interested in the protein pack, because this is where, even if you're gardening and you're not going to have these proteins, but you can stack them back. And this thing has chicken, beef, eggs. So it has a lot of protein that maybe you could mix with the stuff that you're growing. I'm really thinking that this summer is going to be starting all of the hard times as far as it is for people with food. So I think this, beyond any other time that you've thought about buying storable foods, is probably the occasion to give yourself some insurance so that when hard times come and the trucks stop coming, you have a backup plan. At least you have nutrition to get you by. And some other people are not going to be doing that. They're going to be having difficulties and maybe even finding themselves in aggressive situations with hundreds of other people trying to get supplies that are no longer there. And these kits have everything. Fruit, you got the meat. It's all stuff that you're going to need to survive. The insurance that people need right now, I just don't think there's ever been a comparable time other than maybe when, we had soup kitchens in the 20s and right again in the 40s when things were becoming thin again. And we're in that time now. And when you start looking at world events, you can see that the food supply is going to be tied up with multiple different events around the globe. And you don't have to worry about those things if you have this taken care of. You can get 6 weeks, you can get months, depending on the size of your family. This is definitely insurance for survival, because other people are going to be fighting over the scraps that are left at the store, and you don't have to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned something there, the seeds as well, to be able to grow some of your own food in addition to having stored foods. But when it goes down, it is going to go down, and things that you think about it right this second. Everybody's talking about buying gold and silver as a way to hedge against inflation or be able to have something to be able to pay your property taxes in the future. With the devaluation of the currency, well, it will be the exact same thing. Now, do you have enough money to buy an ounce of silver? Perhaps you do. It's the same thing with food preps. The 1 week kit compared to something like a full 6 weeks kit or a 12-week kit. Even if you get just one small minimal thing to add to your stack. I talk to people who prep all the time. It's always about tools, storable foods, water filtration, and a way for you able to store water and filter it at the same time. Because if you can get that closed loop enough, there's always going to be somebody that will help you garden with those seeds. Heirloom seeds is where you want to go. Heirloom open pollinator seeds. Because at the end of the day, when you collect those seeds at the end of your season for growing, you want to be able to store those and then have them so you can replant next year. I think that supply chains are going to start constricting even further. I mean, look at the way that the world laid out. These really incredibly complex supply chains are now starting to fracture in the middle of everywhere. Political strife. We didn't even talk about the ozone depletion event that's going to wipe out food production further in the Southern Hemisphere. The tipping point. Humanity's here. We're seeing it everywhere. So how do you protect your friends and family? Because you got to think everybody has survived. We would not be here having this conversation if people had not survived the last 8,000 or 10,000 years of events that were far greater than what we're going to experience. It just takes a little prepping, a little bit readiness, and I do believe that we'll be able to get through this.
You know, when we're talking about these seeds and the storable foods to go with it, you're going to have to probably invest in both of these ideas. When you go through the list of the seeds that they give you, these heirloom seeds, they're the best type of food that you could possibly get or grow yourself. But you have this backup of the food storage that lasts 25 years.
And that's heavensharvest.com. Use the code ADAPT at checkout. That's ADAPT. Take 15% off your order.
Whatever comes your way, weather, war, whatever it is, you're prepared, you have security. At least you know that your belly's going to be full so that you can continue on the work that needs to be done to stabilize.
And welcome back right here. Many Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, one of them, David DuByne, right along with Ransom Godwin. Flying us into the evening, hyperspace time here. Chocolateflation. Global cocoa shortage sends prices soaring. Consumers should brace for chocolateflation. I think I'm saying that correctly. I never knew that was a word in the dictionary before, but I guess it is now. Cocoa market soaring 44% in the last week. Ouch, what's going on over there? Also, just as we were going on break, I got distracted with a news ticker that flew onto my I have a whole bunch of different alerts set up for different types of things. And here's one for you. Australian bank, Westpac Bank, from August 20th, and I don't know why they would tell everybody from so far out, but from August 20th, all Australian customers will be prohibited from withdrawing more than $1,000 from their accounts per day. Which makes me think, all right, what's going on there? That you're going to be limited to $1,000 when everything else in life is increasing so expensively that chocolateflation is up 44%, which will probably turn into, usually a 3x so on the consumer price level. So whatever you're buying, if it's $1, it's going to cost you $2.20 chocolate. Yet in Australia, you can't withdraw more than $1,000 a day. Like for me, I had some construction guys out here. I needed to go buy lumber from a sawmill, and I can tell you from experience, sawmill operators do not take credit cards. Usually it's a bunch of, people that have old land. They usually have hundreds of acres, and they're out there logging and coming in, and you're in the way of some trucks, and you got to find the owner out there, or the foreman, somebody that's working out on the shift, and tell them what you're looking for, and they might have something dried, maybe not. Maybe you'll need to get some bark cut or whatever, but they don't take credit cards at a lot of these places, especially at a farm. If you're going to go get feed from somewhere, you're going to buy a used piece of equipment. You're going to buy animals, for example. 3 sheep will now set you back $400. If you're looking at a 120-pound sheep, what do we get? 120-pound female, and then we got the 2 babies, or the ewes that were the twins out of that, and they were like 60 pounds each when we bought them. But that was about $400. That already runs through part of that daily withdrawal. So what if I went to the sawmill and went to pick up some animals in the same day? I don't have enough money to do that. That's ridiculous. What's going on over there? I would ask anybody out in the chat box or the chat rooms out there, please, throw some ideas. What do you think? And why is it that they waited and are giving us so much advanced warning? Okay, we're down in June, July, August, 60 days, 65 days from now. You think they would do something sneaky and tell you in the middle of the night, oh, by the way, tomorrow. But Revolution Radio, thanks for letting us talk about these ideas tonight. A lot of, like I said, last week got demonetized, and that video didn't move after that point when I was talking about not being able to reinsure homes out that were burned out in Canada. They're setting up these new fire zones. Watch for it. They're going to be fire risk zones. They're going to be newly appointed too. So they're putting together some kind of commission board to start talking about, again, it's climate based, and okay, these areas here seem to be there's going to be more fires, But it was in the Lake District anyway, a lot of these places up in Quebec, going over the Maritimes. But you got to think, up in the Lake District, There's like 100,000 lakes up there, and each person, either small communities along a lake, they have their own water source. They got the farms up there. But suddenly this entire massive area of Quebec and the Lake District is going to be classified as a fire risk zone, and no homes in that area will be insurable. And that got my video looked at pretty heavily. So anyway, if you consider free speech something that's still valuable, Revolution Radio, consider a donation right there at the top in the browser bar, many ways to donate. Now, Ransom, before the break, I know you were, going off, and me being a goldfish, I was like, sheesh, I gotta have to respond when we come back from break, that very short break. But here's one for you. It seems like, as everywhere, it's all about the food. It's going to be this continuous drum beating of war drums everywhere we see. And guess what? Flash. Again, I got a news ticker that comes in. Flash. Poland says border troops were fired upon from the Belarus side. So the government of Poland just issued a statement that its border guards were fired upon from the territory of Belarus. Now, what is that saying to me here? Well, it's starting from every angle now. Because, Poland had put up a huge, razor wire wall across the country going, nobody coming in, no more migrants, y'all out of here, stay over there. And I'm just wondering, they're itching so bad to get this thing started. And by the way, I was reading something, and just off the glimpse off Zero Hedge earlier today, Newland is going to be appointed in some new position that is going to oversee part of the military and expenditures, etc. Victoria Newland, like, she's just the warist monger ever. And she's going to replace, and I forget the woman's name she's replacing, but that woman that's going to be leaving is like, oh, she's a wild card. Beware, be ready. This girl just wants war so fast. As players coming off a field want to drink a bottle of Gatorade. That's how badly they want the war to start. So again, when everything else fails, they take you to war. Because right now the propaganda is not working. A lot of people are waking up. They're starting to pull the food supply. So that's just alerting a lot of people that, whoa, what's going on? The climate debates move from, okay, don't drive an SUV, into my entire food supply, I can't buy anything without a QR code, and it's only going to come from a factory, and they're going to deem my garden illegal. Oh, when they won't, you're going to have to get on a fertilizer registry. Now, I can't confirm this yet. I'll just hearsay. I had to go buy some parts. So I was up in my local farm co-op, and I said, hey, what's this whole thing about nitrogen? And they're like, yeah, we're hearing about it too. And I said, are you hearing anything official? And they're like, well, not yet, but there's rumblings. Nothing official, but rumblings are they're going to be starting a fertilizer registry. And that's not going to be for you, the home gardener that, buys like a 10-pound bag out of Home Depot or something. It's going to be for farmers. And if you buy 50 pounds or 100 pounds or 200 pounds for the year, you're going to be given a certain allotment that you're going to be allowed to use. And once you go over that allotment, they won't be able to sell it to you. But nothing official yet is coming through. But that's the conjecture that they're going toward already at the farm co-op here, East Tennessee. So if it's already at that point where they're hearing about it and they're already going, yep, we can already see the writing on the wall, which direction it's going. Like, how long does it take before the food supply really starts to shrink if they can't or they won't sell you the nitrogen fertilizer, the NPK fertilizers? Here's the thing, though. I want to split a hair again, like I like doing this. If we're talking about nitrogen being the polluter, do you think they'll also include potassium in that? Or will that potassium get a pass? Because, one thing I noticed last year was when I went to buy the premixed bags of like triple 10, for example, or triple 19, those are pre-formulated and they're mixed at the exact ratio to give you 19% nitrogen. So what happens with that? Those bags completely ran out. So then I had to buy a 50-pound bag of just nitrogen. Then you had to buy just a specific bag of potassium. That was it. And if you want to get anything to flower out and fruit out, you're going to need that. So then it's like buying these different bags and starting to mix them together in a ratio. But it's pretty easy if you're going to do a 1-to-1-to-1, like a 19-19-19 or a 10-10-10. You just take basically like 1 cup, 1 cup, 1 cup. Mix it together, spin it around. The hardest part, though, is to spin it around to get it to mix equally, and that's why those premix bags are the best way to go if you're going to do anything like that. Now, I understand The phosphorus is a good one for me because, like I said, that thing's mixed up the potassium and the phosphorus, excuse me. You need that to get your fruits to flower out and really put on that veg growth or the apple growth or whatever growth you want to get into your orchards. Nitrogen simply puts on leaf growth. So when it comes down to it, and they start putting limits on fertilizer purchases, are they only going to limit the nitrogen, or are they going to allow me to have the phosphorus and the potassium so I can throw out some blooms on my fruit orchard? So this is where you get into the gray area. And I can pretty much, the way everything else is gone, they're going to throw the baby with the bathwater on it and say you can't purchase any fertilizer. So then what's going to happen? We already saw something disappear, like I forget how much of the fertilizer disappeared off the rails. But again, it's all focused on fertilizer. Now they're trying to demonize fertilizer. And isn't it just so convenient that there was a theft of fertilizer? And now it's just, again, the world spins here. The horror of the waking moments of people it's slow burn. It's such a nefarious thing. It's such a slow burn that there's no one big step off event to really wake people up instantly. It's a slow burn, but I can't believe with all the news releases in the last 2 weeks of cutting off our food supply and possible confiscation of farms in America that nobody's waking up yet to the point where, hey, they're cutting off our food supply. Anyway, Ransom, back to you. I always ramble in the beginning of the hour, so Building 7 fell on its own.
It was depressed, sir, just like 1 in 5 Americans are nowadays, evidently. What are they depressed about? We're living in the best country ever with the most opportunities in human history, and yet it's all collapsing and people are depressed. Now, it makes you wonder, you said something else. Here's a goldfish. You were talking about people from third world countries and how when you give them a little bit of hand up instead of a handout, a hand up, you let them do something or give them access to any kind of way to improve themselves or their families. They do it better than anybody. And why is that? It's because, well, where they live, they still have hope. They still have a ceiling to go for. They have convinced people in the Western world that we've already hit that ceiling and it was corrupt and it was racist and it was bad. And so therefore it needs to collapse. You think about that. That's the difference between the two types of people that are in the world now. The people that have fought for freedom and established their civilizations and thought that they had been doing good are now, being told that they're the baddies and it's their fault for everything, including but not limited to the entire destruction of the planet. Now, while phosphorus and nitrogen might be bad for the soil and therefore you can't do it, what about depleted uranium? You know what I'm saying? Or maybe, because you remember that war that they had right before World War III back in 2020 and all the way to 2024 or 2025. I forgot. You remember that war, though, when they blew up that power plant and then they told the rest of Europe and the world that we can't use power plants because it's bad for the environment. And look what happened over in Ukraine. No, that's a fictional thing, but it could be a reality. Just think about all the stuff that they're doing. It's really simple. If you're a human and you have activity, they come up with some reason why that's bad. Hey, you know what? You can't go hide in the forest and hunt for food out there using guns and starting, campfires. That might turn into a forest fire and mess up the air for people in Minnesota or Minneapolis or wherever it goes. You can't grow that food there because that's bad for the environment. You can't defend yourself because, some people, they might do something other than that. So it doesn't matter what you do. It's like, think about that. Next, they'll be telling people that they can't camp because of the risk of forest fires. And, we can't have these forest fires because of the climate. And they're even telling people that they're, infrastructure is falling apart because of the environment. Well, of course it's happening because of the environment. That's what happens to things when you don't upkeep stuff. The environment destroys it. It's so funny that they've, brainwashed people into thinking that their mere existence is their own problem. It's kind of like they're pushing humans over into a suicidal type mindset in the first place with always telling us that we're the baddies for everything. But that's exactly what's going on. You see something that can help you and they will have a reason why that's bad and you shouldn't do it. Can you? I mean, you could easily picture those headlines. Canadians no longer allowed to camp because we can't trust them with the campfires. They might get out of control and start forest fires. Unlike the government that seems to, do that all the time. Like in New Mexico, when they were just burning some leaves, they said it was a controlled burn. They said it was to prevent forest fires. They said. But then the following year, they said it was because you use air conditioners and you drive a gasoline-powered car. And it was the environment that did it. It was climate change. It was changing of the climate. It's all silly, but it's bizarre that they get everybody to believe this. And you're, bringing up the little provocations happening, like in Belarus. Those are the kind of things that they always do. I mean, you can pick a war and that's what they'll do. One of the proxies or a border, they'll say something happened. But sometimes those things don't happen and they never really happened, like the Gulf of Tonkin or, other things like that we call false flags or, but they forget that they have been telling us that. And now I know to just listen to them. What do they tell you? Like, here it goes. Pentagon predicts Ukraine offensive will be long and very violent. So that tells you the point of view from the Americans. They are going to have this, and it's not the Americans. It's not like me and you. It's the military-industrial complex, the neocons, and now the leftists that seem to be all in a happy, unified uniparty. And then where was it here? Things like this are happening. When AI overrules nurses caring for you, and in other words, these governments and companies that are involved in healthcare are allowing decisions to be made by the AI. So when we're already in a world where artificial intelligence decides the worth or not worth of a human being, it kind of sets the bar very low about what's going to happen. Now, to go back to the, if you're a goldfish, you probably forgot at the end of the break, but I don't think our audience is quite the goldfish. But I was talking about the medium age of the world and how if you see what's going on in each one of these countries, you can tell that the damage or the change, I guess the change of the demographic of the world has already been changed. It's not when it's going to happen. It already happened. It's in the process, and it's a mathematical fact. So when you have millions of people between the ages of 18 and 25 invading a country where the medium age is 45 to 50 years old, and most of those families only have one child, you can clearly see that in an amount of 20 years, they'll be outpopulated in their own countries. So that's a guarantee. That's already happened. And then when you look into infertility rates and sterilization, wrong word, sorry, Freudian slip, sterility rates in the Western world, these are the same countries with the high medium age of people. Either like in the United States, I think the medium age was 39 to 49. So even that's middle age. And you look at like Japan and all of these other countries, even China has a medium age of like 35 to 40 years old. So the third world is sending all of their youth. All of their youth is leaving. The people that are young, the people that fight wars, the people that would fix any problems in civilization, the people that are going to populate the next generation. That is, if babies are not outlawed and then began to grow in facilities so that the government can control it from cradle to grave, because that looks like the direction the Western world is going in. But then you have to explain the influx. Why are they influxing so many people? Well, it's because that they can get rid of traditional ideas in those countries, get rid of the ideas of nationalism and the boundaries between countries for a one world government. They've already told us this in detail. They tell us exactly what they're going to do. And here's one. You remember I'd been telling you that I was predicting that they would say that we were being attacked and that, the cyber attacks. And here it is. Exclusive U.S. government agencies hit and global cyber attack. Oh, from CNN, the trusted news and name and news. And it goes on. And if you look in here who they're attacking, supposedly with ransomware, you get down here. And of course, it's stuff like the Department of Energy. That sounds kind of important. And the whole idea that the collapse is already planned is pretty, really in your face. Do you remember a couple of years ago when a team of highly trained, armed people went and destroyed a transformer with weapons, and the news just ignored it? They shut down a major power sector with a little bit of knowledge and some directed manpower, let's say, and that showed the potential of how weak and fragile our infrastructure, especially our grid, is. And now we're not even talking about natural phenomenon that may or may not be happening right now, like the collapse of the magnetic field, maybe incoming objects, et cetera, but you also have the risk of countries detonating EMPs, actual nuclear weapons for destruction, because it looks like this new generation of people that run things, they don't like the fact that they've never got to play with these toys, and they want to. I think that's what it is. We're right at the verge of like World War II, when it seems to be that the elite got together at that time and said, you know what, we need to change society, so we're going to have to destroy all this old machinery, introduce everyone to new technologies, and change the way nations are governed. And that's exactly what they did. They tried it twice. World War I, the League of Nations, complete and utter failure. They tried it again. We got the euro, the Nazi plan of the euro. They went ahead and implemented that idea. And then you also got the United Nations, which is basically a world governing body. And now they're wanting to push it even further, where they take it out of the hands of the elected officials, and it goes to another group of elite people that are more in the industries of designer human beings, designer networks of security, implants. I mean, like all of the stuff that we talk about now as being kind of a sci-fi modern technology thing. These are all the programs that they've been working at since, according to their own literature, the 20s. When they first started talking about eugenics and printing it in books and talking about plans for the future. And if you go read some of those books and some of those things when they were talking, it would be really eerie for you to find out that we're in that time they were talking about. Now, George Orwell kind of put it in your face. We got the 1984 thing. They described it pretty well. And you might want to wonder, like, how did he know all that? Well, he was in the groups of these elite people. I mean, he was a eugenicist himself. These are the ideas they believed in. And since then, they've been showing us these ideas slowly, with modernization of technology, with, pushing ideas. And they did the same thing with this cyber attack stuff. They've been all last year and coming up into the spring. They were telling us that was the major vulnerable thing. Everybody from Klaus Schwab to George Soros to Joe Poopy Pants Biden there, guy. We're all been talking about it, and they keep talking about other things. So you could take them at their word that they are going to, at least pull one of these cards. And it is it's so weird that Illuminati card game's out there, and they named all of these things. It's almost like somebody with a little knowledge created that game just to taunt the public, because they end up doing half of these things, show up, they got a little painting on a card, it looks just like the event. So what's next in there? I'm not really into that. I don't know, but I bet there's a couple nukes and some things like that. Some religious wars. If you've been paying attention to the Middle East, China, Russia, and the United States have their hand up the puppets of the area, and now they're pushing them to have more proxy wars, obviously, in the Middle East. And you got to ask yourself, if the whole world is involved in these programs, what is the ultimate goal? I think we know that. The World Health Organization and all these people talk about a number constantly. Whenever they talk about scenarios of imaginary or future viruses or outbreaks that might happen, they talk about 90% kill rates. You got people talking about literally just reducing the population by 90%. And we're like at the beginning of this phase. It's like we're all living in the chicken house, and the owner of the farm just opened the doors, and they're coming in to cull all of the chickens. And guess what? We're the chickens. We're the sheeple. That's why they're outlawing things that help human beings. So, and when you look at their programs that they have, they never work for the human being. Unless there's a mass exodus or opt out before they get, too much control, because I think they're in a vulnerable position, the elite right now. The population is at 8 billion people, and some of the third world countries do have large millions and millions of people from 18 to 25 years old. Now, if all of them get savvy to the program, and they analyze what has happened to the Western world, and they realize that all of these programs are baiting them into coming in and mixing or incorporating the new civilization, they are the new people that this program will be implemented on next, after they've been used for useful purposes, like eroding nationalities and things like that. It has nothing to do with they try to push this racial agenda, but it has nothing to do with that. It's just the changing of demographics so that they can push political programs and move stuff. So do you think it's too far-fetched to think that maybe some of the troops in Russia or some of the troops in Ukraine or one of the other proxy connections they have might accidentally blow up one of these reactors that they seem to keep putting in the news over and over and over again? They have firefights at them. Now we got flooding at them. Next, that'll happen. And then the whole green movement will use it and say, look, we can't have wars that make the nuclear reactors go critical and they're bad for the environment. We need to go all over to these fans and things like that. It's a silly notion. It's obvious that they're just using these green agendas as an aid to turn off civilization. And you got to wonder what the purpose is to turn off civilization. And I can only find one answer, and that's the reduction of the population. And the reason for that, well, it's right sitting in your face. They can create people now. They're bragging about it. Synthetic human embryos created in groundbreaking advanced, project. They're doing that. For decades, we could grow human beings in a bag. All they needed is blood. Now they don't even need, certain things from the human beings. So we're literally being opted out of our own planet. And they're showing us that they have plans to create a new type of people, and those people will be subservient to this weird feudalistic system of these weird transhumanists that think they're going to live forever. And they're not, they're not holding no bars. They're even bragging, like Elon Musk. I know this is kind of a milquetoast version of it, but he's kind of bragging, look, we're going to put a chip in your head, and you already go to the internet and outsource your memory to the computers. We already use the internet, computers, phones, for an external hard drive, so we don't have to remember stuff. And you can see that very evident in I bet you could still remember telephone numbers from when you were a child that you had to dial or you had to memorize. I can remember like lots of numbers to places. I have them memorized from when I was a kid, and I actually dialed them. You ask somebody that's under 40 years old what someone's phone number is, they have to go to their phone. They don't know it. They don't know how to contact people in the real world. It's all been hijacked by this digital fake reality that they're using to pull the wool over people's eyes while they slowly cull the planet so that they can rebuild a new one. And that is, in a sense, the Great Reset. And if you don't believe me, go ask Klaus Schwab and all of these other bozos. They will tell you. They're bragging about it.
Well, it's all predicated on you believing the climate is changing because of CO2 and that it's not a natural cycle. So I was over on the website electroverse.info, one of the best sites out there. There's a new article up here today, 33 bullet points proving global warming is caused by the sun, or it should actually be changing climate, not CO2. Point number one, I thought was the best one. Obviously, I'm going to read the article. The IPCC, United Nations on Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has none geologists among the hundreds of authors on its payroll of its last major report. That was in 2013-14. At most, one geologist in the next report. Now, the IPCC only focuses on the last 170 years because they say, quote unquote, reliable thermometer temperatures or measurements began in 1850. So we're using the time frame of 170 years. The Earth is 26 million times older than that little time frame reference. Not 26 million years old. 26 million times longer at 4.5 billion years. And geologists understand that best, that throughout the time on Earth, it consistently warmed and cooled. It's never static. Climate change is nothing new, especially this last like 11,650 years, or since the Younger Dryas era, the Holocene, interglacial epoch. We come out of ice ages and we go into ice ages, and somehow that we're responsible for something that's just an average person will not know, that we come out and we are in ice ages longer than we're in the warm period. If you were to walk up to somebody on the street and say, how long is Earth generally in an ice age compared to how long is it warm in a warm period? They're going to look at you like you got like 6 heads. Nobody really knows. I mean, there's probably how many, Ransom, what do you think? 5% of the population? 10% maximum? Not even. That would know that the Earth is in an ice state 90% of the time. So how does it go from full ice 2 miles thick over like Chicago into warm, balmy, you're on the beach sipping cocktails? Like, how does this switch occur? You know, at these time frames in these last 400,000 years, you know, what's driving the shift between warm period, cold period on a cycle? 90,000 years in, 10,000 years out. 90,000 years in cold, 10,000 years of warm. 90,000 years of ice, 10,000 years of warm. Like, what's driving that cycle in itself? Because earlier today I was watching a YouTube channel, and he was talking about a 3,600 year cycle. And 7 of those 3,600 year cycles is now. We're at the end of that 7th cycle of 3,600 years, which apparently is the most catastrophic, because it marks the entry of an ice age. After 4 of those great cycles, boom, we're back into it. So his whole program was about, we're at the end of the 3,600 year cycle. It's going to be a little bit gradual, like a 10 to 20 year change period. But here's the thing. You know, I'll say it again. Like, a lot of these things that they're showing that they're going to do to the populace, there's going to be far less people when this occurs. And the levels of control, will they really get to that? Or is it just to keep you in fear, biting your nails all the time? Now, I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm just saying the level of control that's you would perceive behind the mirrors and smoke and the Wizard of Oz pulling the levers there isn't going to be where it's at. If you reduce the world's population even 50%, every single one of these plans doesn't work anymore. There'd be so much non-functionality across the entire planet for decades, plural, that nothing would really function to the point it functions even right now at barely functional. You remove 75% of the global population, and it really just takes us back into the 1850s. So how do they trace somebody back in the 1850s? Electricity is not barely working unless everybody comes out of the countryside into the cities, which will be minimally populated anyway. Can you imagine going into any major metropolitan area and just saying, all right, only 1 out of 14 of you can stay here? At 500 million people, that means 1 out of 14 lives through the thing. So I'll even give you the best bet out of the doubt and say, all right, 1 out of 8. So the population goes from 8 billion on the planet down to 1 billion. You're going to subtract that out of the cities too, let alone the countryside. So let's say there's 8 million people in a city, like New York, for example, and boom, it's right down to 1 million. Like, how functional would a city be like New York with only 1 million people there? And all the breakdown and the chaos involved in taking that from 8 million down to 1 million. Like, the chaos phase of everything that we're going through here is non-controllable by the means that is set out, where they're going to do this, they're going to do that, they're going to control this, they're going to control that. Because a global war would push things even faster. Now, the reason I wanted to bring that war up in the whole discombobulation of reality and life itself, I traveled in the Czech Republic, what was that, back in 2019. And we were in Prague, and I remember seeing all this stuff, like our flight got canceled, coming back through Xi'an in China. And that moment when I knew, because the rumblings when we were leaving was all about like COVID in China in 2019. And they canceled our flight coming back through Xi'an. And right then, because there was the thing going on, right then, I mean, every sense in my body, I cannot tell you how it occurred, but it was like the biggest download of postcards of flashing things like, this is the real deal for right now. And I was like, all right, well, I need to get ready here. Let's bail out of here. But the thing about Czech Republic, after World War II, went to the communist side, was taken in by the Russians. And, you know, the way that history would say it, well, that was just where the line was drawn. It was not just where the line was drawn. It was a coin toss between Austria going back to the Russians or Czech Republic going to the Russians. It really came down to like the last 12 hours of negotiations of where the new lines would be drawn. It wasn't that they were already there. It was like that land was bequeathed over back to. So, you know, you look at the alcoholism and a lot of problems from communism, quote unquote communism, where people just did what they had to do. There was no purpose in life. It was like you get up, you go, you know, dudes were drinking hardcore half a bottle of whatever by the time they got home from work. And then after that, they finished the rest of the bottle off to get ready to go to work the next day. Like alcoholism was rampant. I mean, just unbelievable. And it got dark really. We went in the wintertime, so it got super dark there early. Like at 4 p.m., the sun was already setting. And can you imagine being in a communist place, relegated to working in a factory? It gets dark at 4 p.m., and you got no hope in life. Like, of course you would drink. And the functionality of Czech Republic, now that it's back to quote-unquote Western hands or in the EU, took them like 25 years to come out of that. But then right across the border over in Austria, things were like, nothing. It just as day one. But see, that was the thing that I never knew about history was those two countries, it was literally a coin toss to see which one would go over to the Russians as the lines were redrawn. That's sickening. The way the perception of history has been played out is fictitious at best. And what was the purpose of that, of sending one country into communism along with Poland and that whole Lithuania and areas, than it was to leave Austria over in the Western powers? I mean, look at this flip-flop. Like after this war occurs, there's going to be these same lines redrawn in terms of, food production areas, economic zones, communist zones, respur the economy, got to put the debt in economy zone will be, they got to restart the debt cycle zone will be somewhere in Africa, obviously, because they got all the resources there. Like Africa is going to be the new America as we go through this war cycle and back into the reset. They can restart the debt cycle there. Can you imagine all the people that are there? Can you take them from zero to American lifestyle? Like how much money would be created during that time? And you take the Americans from the American lifestyle down into the African lifestyle, like how much money can be transferred and milked out and transferred to a different part of the planet? The misery and suffering occurring with that is one thing. And I didn't want to talk about space aliens for a second because we couldn't go this episode without talking about that. Now you look at this and you could say interdimensional entities would be feeding off of that low vibration energies coming off human resonance fields. Well, I'm not talking about that. That's a different interdimensional, if you believe there is such a thing, feeding trough for these interdimensional beings to feed off of low vibration energies. And again, you look at this world pyramid of power and elite families, etc. I don't even know if they are human. But whatever they set the conditions up for is a certain vibratory state. And if it is in an interdimensional realm, then it would be set up as a feeding trough for something else in a different realm. But at the same time, I was listening to Cliff High just the other day, drifting off to sleep. And he starts talking about space aliens because of the landing and these videos that are coming out. And Ransom, you talked about that last week, about these chimeras and different types of things that could have been grown in a lab. And it looked very much like, and I look at that little tweaky thing, looking with its head and thing, and I'm like, that was grown in a lab, man. That's not really an alien. But anyway, Cliff goes on for a second. He's like, think about the foods that we consume as humans. One of the most valuable traded commodities for the space aliens is human belly fat. And I was like, what? Let me rewind that a second there, man. Talking about tradables and commodities and agriculture, farm earth. Think about that. And then I thought for a second, all right, it might not be true. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but it does make sense. Think about how the human body could be farmed for a certain part that has a higher value. So he's talking about belly fat. Whatever for the space aliens is like the most valuable product from a human on a physical realm, not the energetic realms and interdimensional realms, but the physical realm. The belly fat. It's like, look at all these, saturated oils and heated garbage that comes off the canola plants and all these different things that just gigantically fat people running around everywhere. And 1 million of them disappear out of America every single year. It's like, there could be the occasional hiker that, drops off a cliff and, something, animals eat it apart, but generally they'll find the clothing or something and the remains might be gone, but you got the clothing's there and a bear ate it and then the vultures picked it or something. Okay, that happens. But it's like there's 1 million people per year that go missing in America. And I thought, what? That's insane. So I did look it up, and it's actually all of North America. It includes Canada and Mexico. But 1 million people disappear without a trace across North America every single year. And I'm thinking, 1 million? That's crazy. That is a huge, huge, huge amount of people. Now, he was trying to say statistically, you need to look at the body weight on these people that are disappearing. Like if they're going to harvest the belly fat off of these people, and then he's like, well, then you really don't have to go that far. What if you had liposuction? And then you start to get these clinics, but these clinics that are removing fat out of the human body are actually harvesting the resource out of the human. And I thought it was the most interesting conversation to think about off-planet entities, space aliens, down on our planet. Now it's across every single news wire that there's UFOs here, there's space aliens there. We got landings over, and excuse me, Ransom, if I get it wrong. I thought you said it was Arizona. I read the article too, but it's so fanciful and the weird videos coming out. They're talking about earthquake machines in Antarctica. And if anybody wants to look at this video, I'd seen just a snippet of it. It was Stephen Greer was, introducing Eric Hecker from Raytheon, his contractor. Was talking about all these earthquake machines down in Antarctica. And it seems like there's this plethora of information of anti-gravity craft that are our own from the 1940s, these anti-gravitics, and the experimentation from Germany all the way over to NASA, et cetera, with these free energy devices and, weightless travel machines. And, we are well off our planet out into the other parts of the solar system and communications faster than the speed of light. But the one thing that got to me was, I've heard about all this before, but the thing that got me was the seed oils. Like the food that's being pushed into us. And, to wrap it up, the foods that's being pushed into us, and Ransom, you said that they can grow a person that they don't even need the human anymore to, care for or have that love for the child. Now, can you imagine a twofold of this thing? Okay, these, whatever they would be called, that doesn't have a human host parent that was created in a lab and grown in an artificial womb somewhere, is birthed, quote unquote. The military could take control of them and train them from birth, and that's all they would know, and they would never know there's a difference of something outside with friends and play and all this stuff. And that would just be their life from day one. They would be super soldiers. But then on the other side of it, you could have a whole contingent of them just being completely fed GMO, fat, saturated oils, all these kind of cottonseed oil and canola oils, and get them as fat as you possibly could, like just unbelievable. Oh, wait, like we see at every amusement park across America, that kind of fat, and just continually harvest their belly fat. according to Cliff, is one of the most valuable products across our solar system is belly fat from a human. It's kind of like pork belly for those of you who enjoy pork belly and pork rinds and that sort of stuff. But I'm just finding a lot of similarities in it. And then one last thing, Jason and the Argonauts, it brought me right back to that movie, Because once they got captured, their boat crew got captured, the giants that had them started feeding them. And there were like two guys that are like, no, man, I'm not going to eat that. I just don't want to eat it. I think it might be poison. I'm not going to eat it. So there was like two guys that didn't eat it. The rest of the crew started eating. And from bite one, they just couldn't stop eating. And for like the months that they were captured there, the crew gained like tripled their weight. It was pure fat. And then the two guys that didn't eat were skinny bones. And the giants didn't want to eat those guys, and they let them go. And those were the two survivors that went back to tell the tale of being captured by, don't eat the food, man. We were captured by the giants, and whatever was in the food kept making the people that were there want to eat more food, and they just couldn't stop eating once they took those first bites. I know there's like 3 different things there, but I think they all really dovetail. And, you know, this whole chimera thing that you got onto with the space aliens, and I'm wondering why so many people are disappearing. And, you know, is belly fat truly a traded commodity across our solar system and further wide into different star systems? You know, maybe that's a little too woo-woo taking it into the midnight hour, but I thought I would go there.
Well, you know, my goldfish made me, you know, my goldfish mentality. I had to look it up there because I was watching something the other day. I don't know if it was the 411 or something. And I did watch the thing about the Antarctica, and the guy basically saying what's there is the real deal HAARP, not the fake, you know, HAARP thing that they were telling everybody that they could make earthquakes. But this thing is actually messing with neutrinos and stuff, and it could not only cause earthquakes in different places, but it could track any faster than light vehicle or, you know, things like that. And that's already built, and the infrastructure's been being built since the 50s for that. That's a pretty out there idea, but let's go to the belly fat thing. You know, you're missing one component. You're thinking about seed oils and all that. Do you know what the number one chemical, or I don't know what you call that exactly. What is it? A steroid maybe, or some kind of toxin? But isn't cortisol like the main thing that's in belly fat? It's like a stress hormone. Excuse me. Yeah, it's a hormone. It's a stress hormone. Now, you were talking about the interdimensional beings possibly feeding off the negativity, but, you know, if you spin that over to a real, like you were saying, a real material, physical type manifestation of that idea, you would be eating things like adrenochrome and maybe, you know, a bunch of belly fat that's full of stress hormones from the human being because they didn't eat right, they didn't exercise, they're scared all the time, toxins in their environment, whatever the different, you know, environmental factors that lead to the buildup of cortisol and belly fat. And then people, you know, are big people. But if you think about, if there was really like an alien race doing it for that purpose, like, you know, you'd think that the liposuction places would be offering that for free. Here, come on down, and we'll take that off you for only $39.95 and $4 each. You know, no, of course they would make money off of it, but it would be really, really cheap and easy to get if, you know, like that was the thing. Now, if the human being, on the other hand, in some kind of a fear state was the actual product, as we were talking about before. Human beings are products. That's why people get arrested for selling stolen goods when they trade in body parts. It's goods because they're products. And, you know, that's why, you know, as the late, great Jordan Maxwell talked about, we're born with a birth certificate and you know, it's the manifest is the man who made it and all of this stuff, you know, because you go see the doctor before the birth, and everything's related in this hidden language of maritime law. Everything about money refers to water. Everything about ownership and being born has to do with water, the whole thing. So when you think about, let's see here, you were talking about the missing people every year. According to NAMA's database, there are 600,000 people declared missing every year. Alongside that statistic, there are 4,400 unidentified bodies discovered every year. And then it goes on to say, only 0.7333% of people who go missing are ever found or able to be identified. The others are either, not found or no one knows what happened to them. So that is a really, scary idea that you're supposed to live in a safe first world country, yet the borders are porous and, anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million people go missing every year with no clue where they go. And then, speaking of the alien stuff, there's a lot of weird stuff with that, 411. Missing 411 because, it gets into some weird dark areas of the dark government because a lot of people don't know that the Park Service and the Forest Service and all of that is under the same guise as the Secret Service. And everybody knows the Secret Service is really loyal to who? Not the Treasury, but the central banking cartel, the Federal Reserve Bank. And that's why they're in charge of all instances of counterfeiting or, things to do with money. They send the Secret Service because they're people that have no real rules inside the Constitution. So if you go missing on any national park or national monument, there's only one group that can investigate that, and that's the Park Service people. And guess what? They don't have to share their information. And then if you really get into some of those missing things, a lot of those people were just gone with their clothes and everything else found there. So, it's not that far-fetched to think that there is some kind of black market trade. In fact, we know that there is white slavery going on. And no, I don't mean the color of someone's skin, but sexual slavery that's in mass numbers in the United States and other first world countries. And then you think about all of the people that come in. We know that there's up to 40 or 50 million people that are not citizens in the last 20 years that have occupied in the United States, bringing our population up to about 400 million. Now, that leaves you with about 50 million people that are unaccounted for, that no one keeps track of. And a lot of those people are children that no one knows where they go. And there's been a lot of investigating going on, some more down-to-earth aliens, that is going along the southern border. They're finding these giant kid camps that's just full of kids' clothing, bottles, baby stuff. And it indicates that there are very few adults with a massive amount of kids that are pouring over the border. Now, where these kids go, no one knows. But it might have something to do with the current administration and some of the things that they're trying to hide, because people don't just kill themselves or go missing on their own, usually. In other words, Epstein might not have, choked himself out in jail, and the cameras might maybe actually have worked or they were turned off. Every area of something like that just peels the surface on something that would revolutionize the thinking and understanding of the lower class or peasants or the mass, populace of what the elite actually do, immediately gets snuffed and never talked about again. You can pick any of your great conspiracy theories, JFK, 9/11, et cetera, and you'll find out that there is some really shady stuff going on. And a lot of that stuff has already been declassified. I mean, we know about Operation Gladio, about Operation Northwoods. These are things where our own governments have black programs going on where they're doing dirty deeds. And so the idea that 500,000 people go missing or more, 500,000 to 1 million people just go missing, and that less than 1% of them are ever found or identified, that should disturb anybody. I mean, think about if you lived in a town of, 100 people, and, 10 of them went missing, you would want to know what happened to them, wouldn't you? I mean, you would think that the law enforcement would find out what happened to them, but that's not actually the case. And then, I made a video about this. You got woo-woo. I made a video called, Do You Ever Feel Like Somebody's Watching You? And it's a mix of that old song that I made, and I put it to some different pictures and stuff. And I showed this program of the late 90s with a drone called Argon. And it was a drone in the late 90s, like a Predator drone that had, like 1,000 little iPhone camera on it, on the bottom of it. So it gave a super high resolution picture, and it could fly around for hours. And what they showed is in the middle 90s to the late 90s, the United States government, amongst others, had the operational and technical skills to fly drones and high altitude balloons over every city and keep track of it in real time. And I don't mean just looking at it. I mean keeping track of every moving object down there. So there's a little box. And now that when you fast forward and think about Dragon software, so now they have an input on the street level in your pocket, and from above, it's a complete control grid. And they keep track of every person, every little box, every car that moves, every person that walks, which tells you that every little kid or someone that goes missing could be found within hours with that technology, but it's not shared with the general public. It's not shared with law enforcement. And you only can come to one conclusion when you realize that they are watching and they do see these things happen. It's that either the people that are in control of these systems are complicit or they're active participants in all of it. Missing adults, missing children, the trafficking of humans from one country to another on massive scales, like we see right here in our backyard, not 70 miles south of me. I just recently visited there, and there's still tent cities of migrants all over. It was less than there was a month ago, but it's starting to be hot in 100-degree temperatures. So that changes things.
Yeah, I was seeing there was going to be a little heat down in Texas, but give it about 10 days, you're going to start to see a cool blob move back in, but you won't hear about that. You're not going to hear about the Arctic front coming down into Europe and cooling the areas from Central Europe through Ukraine all the way over to Mongolia. That's what's on tap in the next few days. Anyway, sheep, the elite, the theorists who are all trying to keep our sanity. Just prepare, grow your own food, and see you next week. Thanks for joining us for your valuable time tonight.
Thank you for listening.
We got something out of it. David DuByne, Ransom Godwin.